Hey, Katy.
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's really exciting to be here.
Hello and welcome to Talk Heathen. Today is January 17th, 2021, Season 5, Episode 3. I'm Bianca, and with me today is special guest Katy Montgomerie.
Hi. How are you?
I'm doing good, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys. This might be the first time that two trans people have taken over Talk Heathen. So this is a historic day.
From now on, no cis people ever again.
Ever again. Sorry, guys. That's just the rule. Katy, tell us a little bit about you. What do you do and why are you here?
Hi, I'm Katy Montgomerie, and I'm a dickhead who argues on the internet. That's basically my entire status. No, I'm a feminist and LGBT rights enthusiast, and I do a lot of arguing about that on Twitter, and I've recently moved on to YouTube as well. And I like to try and approach those issues from like a skeptical position. So I am also an atheist and a skeptic, and I like to use the same kind of approaches and skills and arguments and stuff to apply that to sort of LGBT rights and that kind of thing. So that's like my main kind of focus. And I'm also a good metal guitarist in a thrash death band called Dehumanort. So if anyone wants to check them out, you're welcome.
Nice. So officially the coolest person ever on Talk.
Oh, and also I really like insects, which explains my background, which is some pro legs of a caterpillar, which I think is really cute. It's got these little like hooks and they like hook onto the little things.
It's like the tardigrade from Star Trek. I like it.
I guess similar kind of feet. Because these aren't real legs. These are caterpillars have 6 like proper legs at the front, because all insects have 6 legs. And then they have these like fake legs all the way down, which operate with this like hydraulic system. So they don't have all the like knees and stuff that normal legs have. Anyway, I'll stop talking about caterpillar legs.
I like it. And my background is because I clearly am a fan of green demon orcs. And I have horns today, apparently. And, whoa, that's creepy. I'm not going to do that again. That's disturbing. All right, you guys. So we have the regular announcements that I want to get through first, and then we'll jump on some calls and talk with some people. So as you guys know, Talk Heathen is a product of the ACA, the Atheist Community of Austin, which is a 501c3 nonprofit, which means we run on donations. You can donate a variety of ways. We have super chats, we have Patreon. We also have the super nifty direct donation thing that we can run fundraisers with. And the cool thing about that is that YouTube doesn't take any amount of those funds. So if you want to donate and give 100% to the ACA, as opposed to a subsection of that to YouTube, direct donation right above the live chat is the best way to do that. We are also going to be thanking our top 5 patrons about 2/3 of the way through the show. So keep an eye out for that. If you want to have your name shouted out, we will be refreshing right before and giving you a little bit of love. As always, nonprofits are on at 3 p.m. Central. We're going to be trying to wrap up around 2:30 so we can jump into Discord and talk with you guys for a little bit. So anybody who's still on the line at that time can hop over to Discord and have a more informal conversation with some other fans as well. And I did want to do one quick shout out, which is, if you guys have not been following this story, Zara K is a ex-Muslim activist in the atheist community who has been doing a whole lot of work in Tanzania and across the world to promote skepticism from a ex-Muslim background. She has been taken into custody in Tanzania and is currently facing some trumped up charges that were allegedly a direct result of a post that committed blasphemy, right? Quote unquote. So if you're curious about how that's going, how you can help, there's a fundraiser, there's awareness raising up on Twitter, the hashtag free Zara K or justice for Zara K. Hashtags are good places to start there. I know Seth Andrews just did a video on this on his channel as well, The Thinking Atheist, so go check that out. But we just wanted to give a shout out here and make sure that everybody in our community kind of knew what was going on, and just to kind of reiterate that this is still activism, right? This is still dangerous work. This is stuff that is not acceptable and a non-issue across the world, right? There are still so many places that this message of skepticism and freedom from religion needs to get brought to. So by supporting us, by supporting people like Zara K, you are making a difference. All right. Katie, anything else before we get started?
No, I didn't think I have anything else to add, unless you want any more insect facts. I mean.
You know what? We don't have too many callers, so we may need to vamp, and that is totally okay then. We can move into insect facts. We are currently have some people on the line. We don't have nearly as many as we used to, so call in. And here's a clue, right? Theists who call in early get more time. If you wait till 2/3 of the way through the show and call in, you're going to get 5-10 minutes tops, because we're trying to get through everybody before we close out. If you call in early, chances are you're going to get a longer conversation with us. So if that's something you would like, call the show at 512-991-9242 or tiny.cc/callth. And be honest with our call screeners, please, you guys. That's kind of a prerequisite to having an honest conversation, is, representing yourselves accurately. All right. Let's dive in. Let's talk with Paul in Texas. All right. Paul in Texas.
Hi.
You're on the air.
Hi, Paul.
What can we help you with today?
Hi. So I believe I have proof and or evidence of an omnipotent being.
Cool.
It's kind of a step-by-step process, and I just want to take it kind of slow and go as far as you want. But just where do you want to start with the proof or the evidence, or the definitions, right?
Well, yeah, I think the best way to get started is kind of give us a sneak peek of like the final thing you're going to be trying to convince us of, and then we'll get into definitions and kind of how you got there. So what is this evidence that you're going to present?
Okay. So the goal is to present something akin to deism, an omnipotent deism, which can then step off to theism. But we just need to start with deism, because once deism is proven or evidence is shown, then atheism is falsified. It's taken off the table, and then
yes, and I want to make sure we're differentiating between proven versus evidence shown, right? Those are certainly not the same things.
Right. They're totally different. I agree.
Okay. All right. So we're going to try and prove deism with the goal of eventually getting that to theism.
Right.
Okay. So what's your proof for deism?
Go for it.
Okay. So just straight off the bat, that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. We're going with the Chris Hitchens law, and I believe that. I sincerely believe that. I also believe in Thomas Jefferson's quote, "Question with boldness even the existence of a God, because if there be one, he must more prove to the homage of reason than that of blindfolded fear." And when I say reason, I'm talking about both deductive and inductive reason. Okay. So where do we start? So at the basement level, we start with agnosticism, I, not an A, or atheism. I'm sure you've heard of those. So that's the subset of atheism that is like, well, we don't even have, a coherent or consistent definition of God in order to prove one. So we need that first. You need to define your terms before attempting to do proof of evidence. So
Okay.
start with
So let's
that.
let's define your deist God. What are the parameters that we're trying to look for?
So we need to consistently define God, not to according to any proper names. That's where people get thrown off. We're not going for any proper names at this point. Maybe much later on down the process, but at this point, we need to define God according to his attribute, or according to an attribute. Okay.
Yeah, this is not
omnipotent.
new. Like, people have been defining God by
Right.
attributes. That's where the kalam and various iterations of that come from, right?
Right.
Okay, so how is yours different than
Right,
kalam?
right.
Or is it kalam?
Oh, it's not kalam. No,
Okay.
it's not kalam at all. Though it may use components of kalam, but I do understand the weaknesses of that argument. So that's why I reject that argument. So the only consistent and reliable definition of God that I seek to prove is omnipotence.
Okay, why that one?
Anything falling short of that attribute in all fairness is disqualified from consideration.
Why?
In the Oxford English Dictionary, omnipotence is defined as all-powerfulness or almightiness. And just as another disclaimer, I'm not trying to prove that
Okay, Paul, real quick. I know, Paul.
Go ahead.
Okay. I get the sense that you've done a lot of research and you've got this like out in bullet points or something, which is great. I love it when people bring research, as long as they're not sticking directly to the script and can have conversation, which I think we're good with.
Yeah, sure.
My question for you is, where did you come across omnipotence as the thing? Because there are even versions of Christianity where God is not omnipotent. So why pick that one term?
It's the weirdest thing. Jeff D. Actually, I was a huge fan of Dungeons and Dragons since I was a little kid, and I was really wrestling with the which God, the Ricky Gervais. Well, it's not limited to Ricky Gervais, but I first heard it from him. The which God question, right?
Yeah.
And I'm thumbing through a Dungeons and Dragons book illustrated by Jeff D. because he was an artist at the time, and I'm looking at all of these gods it was the Deities and Demigods book, and I'm like, wow, they all got numbers and statistics listed next to them. One god is more powerful than another. One god is limited to this pantheon. One god is limited to this. And I'm like, wow, I wonder, what am I looking for? What am I trying to prove here? And I'm like, well, it would have to be a being.
Yeah, we're waiting on that one.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, but
have to be a being within.
But all of those other ones, like all of those other gods that you were just looking at, they're all gods that aren't omnipotent, aren't they? So why is omnipotence a feature of a god? Like, if you did discover something that was omnipotent, why would that be a god? And then also, why does a god need to be omnipotent when you've kind of just given examples of real world Dungeons and Dragons gods that aren't? Like, why are those two features connected?
So
being a god,
I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed with all of these named beings, right? And I'm trying to figure out, okay, which god, right? And
my one.
Paul,
you have to have something. Go ahead. Sorry.
You didn't answer Katie's question. I think you're trying to get on with your point, and you're very well spoken. I think this could be a great essay or thesis. We want to make sure we're having a conversation. So Katie asked, why did you choose omnipotence as your qualifier for God? And isn't that disproven by the fact that there are so many gods that are not omnipotent?
Okay. So answer one. Sorry, I apologize for getting ahead.
It's okay.
One, omnipotence is the only consistent definition, a consistent and clear definition for God that I can see that cuts through all the crap.
How do you determine what's crap and what isn't?
Because we're addressing it from an atheistic perspective. We're addressing all of these conflicting names with all of these abilities, cultures, and they vary so much. How do you determine which one is right? And so you need kind of a compass or a mean, something that is consistent and clear. And so I'm hearing atheists and agnostics saying, yeah, we need that up front because there's just so much static We have to cut
Right.
through the static.
And
So-
I get that. And I like that you're acknowledging this. But the point here is that why are you not going down the route of, oh, there are gods, they're just limited in power, and also they have been dead for a while, right? Like, you could go in that direction as well. Why are you picking this one direction of omnipotence?
I can't go down that direction because of the which God argument. Does that make sense? I can't go down that route because.
Okay.
Is that just avoiding someone's argument rather than confronting
atheists actually have great questions that are really relevant to the discussion, and I'm looking at some of their questions. I'm like, yeah, they've got a really great point here. The which God argument really has to be answered, and that's a big one. And so I took that with seriousness, with great care, and so. In order to cut through all of that, what do we mean by God? How do we define God? And so I'm going with omnipotence, and the reason why is to cut through the static for consistency.
So it's kind of an arbitrary choice because there are some other
litmus test for all other claims.
Paul?
Sorry, go ahead.
There are some other properties that lots of different gods are said to have, like omnipresence, for example. And you could say, oh, you've kind of arbitrarily picked omnipotent because, I mean, that is a thing that people often say about gods. My God's all powerful.
Oh, yeah.
But why pick that over omnipresence? Like, maybe there's this one God in one culture which is omnipotent, and another one which is just omnipresent, and one which is both, and one which is neither. And you're saying, well, I'm picking omnipotence because I've got to pick something to define. And that's a good point. Right. You need to know what you're trying to argue. But it is just an arbitrary choice, unless you're saying it's not an arbitrary choice, I guess is what the point we're making.
Well, essentially that's the goal. I mean, that's what I'm hearing when I hear God. If you're saying this God, let's consider. For example, let's take Thor. Okay, you can claim, if you're a worshiper of Thor, you can claim Thor is omnipotent. Great. How do we test for that? You look at the mythology, you look at the claims being made of Thor. He's limited to one sphere of influence, thunder, lightning, weather, maybe war, fighting, just off the top of my head.
Maybe he just likes those things. Maybe he's omnipotent and he just really likes lightning, so he spends all his time doing that.
The bigger question here, though.
Covered by Freya, right?
Paul, the bigger question here is, yes, I agree that other forms of gods, especially pantheons, especially in different pagan and neo-pagan groupings, they all have their own area of expertise, let's say, right? And everybody focuses on that one thing and does that thing. And, that explains the chaos in the universe for some people. My concern here is that you're trying to get away from the difficult questions by finding a way through to something that you can prove. And while on one hand, sure, we want
to find a solution.
Right, but you're trying to find a solution that still clings to a very specific kind of God. And this is my problem with things like process theology, where they're taking...
Theism.
I know, but your goal is to get to theism, right?
Eventually.
Yeah. So here's the deal. Here's the deal.
That goal yet? I mean, that's way down the line.
I know. I'm not critiquing the argument. I'm critiquing the way that the argument is being formulated and the motivation behind it. I love that you're listening to atheists and taking that in. I would encourage you to try and get a little bit deeper and say, okay, why are these arguments hitting? What do we actually know? And your example about Thor is actually quite compelling to me because you said, how do we know if Thor is all powerful? Where we look at the mythology and we look at the stories. Stories and mythology do not prove the existence of a thing. So before we even look at the attributes, we have to see if it exists in something apart from the stories we're telling about it, right? So what we're trying to get to, Paul...
disqualified, then I can come up with pretty much anything, any definition of God that I want. Instead of saying, well,
and that's the problem.
That's kind of the issue.
Okay, I could just say then those haven't been proven yet. I mean, I'm still good. I'm still in the open. I haven't disqualified myself. I haven't made any errors yet. no objective errors.
Well, the error would be believing in a thing before it can be proven or disproven.
Agreed. How did I do that?
Well, if you said, well, I believe in a God that just can't be proven yet, I'm just picking random attributes, the issue would be that you're picking random attributes for a being that we don't know whether or not exists.
We're still at the definitional stage.
Okay. I don't think we're ever getting out of the definitional stage at this point. Paul, I think that this conversation would be great to have on the Facebook page or in the Discord. I think it's going to work a lot better written out. Or if you want to get down to it, we can certainly have you back on the show. I think we're going to move on to the next caller. But I would encourage you to think a little bit about why you're so motivated to reduce this God down to something you can prove just so you can keep a hold of it. Because I think that is going to get you a lot farther than trying to pick attributes willy-nilly.
It does feel like that you're like, coming up with arguments to dodge around criticisms rather than like coming at them head on.
Yeah.
I'm having to avoid the which God question. So what I'm going to do is come up with a reason why I don't have to answer the which God question.
Exactly. And this is kind of the issue, as I was saying before, that I have with things like process theology, which is an attempt to get out of certain really, relevant questions about God, like the problem of evil and the issue of logical contradictions within an omnipresent, omnipotent.
Omnipotent is a good example of if you're picking that as a God, like that one feature I would say was impossible. So that alone really is kind of an argument against picking that as something to prove.
Right. And the goal here is to see if there is reason to believe in a God at all, not to find a version of God that can dodge all of the arguments.
I also think this is kind of backwards how you would do anything else. Like everything else that exists is because you've seen the evidence and you're like, oh, what is that? Why am I suddenly wet now I've gone outside? Oh, it's because of rain. You didn't sort of sit inside and be like, oh, I'm defining this idea of like there's got to be something coming out the sky, and so and we can't talk about which chemical, so I'm just going to say that things that fall out the sky. It's like it's kind of the wrong way around. You need to see the evidence and then work out what it is from that.
Right. And there's a difference there again between, what we consider to be the scientific process and the philosophical process, right? Even though they're interlinked, you can hypothesize about a thing philosophically all day and prove it with words by putting them in the right order. But at the end of the day, that's meaningless unless you have something to back up that it actually exists in the real world. All right, let's jump into another call. I am very excited to talk to Tom in California.
Hi, Tom.
Hi, Tom in California. You're on the air with V and Katy. How can we help you today?
Hello, V and Katy. How are you doing today?
Doing good. What is on your mind?
I'm actually calling for some advice. I'm a very new atheist.
Oh, congratulations. Welcome to the club.
The two of you was, after you deconvert, what is the next step? Or is there even a next step? It feels like there should be one.
That's a really good question.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question.
I think, I guess it depends about, like, for me, the first thing I would think about is like your social circle and like the structures in your life. I know that a lot of religious people have a lot of their life based around their religion and everything that comes with that, the community and all that kind of stuff. And if you are someone who lives in a really secular country and you were the only religious person you knew and you stop being religious, then there might not need to be a next step. But I think for a lot of people, there's a lot of things tied up in their beliefs, in their day-to-day life. And it's good to not just, maybe some of those things you can drop. Maybe you used to go to church on a Sunday and now you don't anymore, and you just don't need to replace it. But if you've got like a huge community supporting you and you suddenly don't have a big community anymore, then you might find certain things in your life more difficult if you don't at least consider what you might need to replace and what you might need to work around and that kind of stuff.
How's that strike you, Tom?
That sounds like good advice. This has actually been kind of, when I'm thinking about it, it's been kind of a long process. I grew up in a very religious community, and our school was religious, but in a way, they kind of prepared us for the outside world. We were encouraged to ask questions. We were taught science. Like, we were told that evolution is true, that it is factual, and that Noah's Ark is scientifically impossible. And so I grew up kind of paradoxically in both worlds, I suppose. And then we had the pandemic, and I kind of fell down a rabbit hole, and I discovered your channel, and I've been listening to it, and that kind of helped with my deconversion. And then the student in me is still trying to learn more things. I've been studying, I'm going to say his name wrong, Bill Zurcher, I believe is what his name is. And he talks about the history of God and how it all came to be. And I found that fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess maybe it's still part of the religious background. I feel like there should be more, or there's some more research that I should do.
Uh-huh.
I guess, sorry, did you want to say something, V? I didn't mean to cut you off again.
Oh, you're fine. Go ahead.
Okay. I guess something that I've had both times that I've kind of come out as something to myself, like an atheist and also as a trans person, was that I kind of felt like I needed to learn more about it, because in a way I was still quite insecure about it. Like, if someone, when I was first becoming an atheist, when I was like 16 or 17 or something, if someone confronted me about that, there was so many gaps in my understanding. Like, a good sort of apologist could have asked me a question from a certain angle that I hadn't thought about before, and I might have felt like it was wrong, but I might not have been able to argue that and like step by step walk through it. And that made me feel quite insecure about it. And also, like, it isn't kind of an identity in a way, and someone's kind of challenging you and you feel like, oh God, I don't understand this, or just that you need to defend yourself. And I think that sometimes doing research can just make you feel more confident and more sort of, secure as the, like, in your position, I guess.
Yeah, I would jump off that exactly, Katie, and say, if your instinct is to do more research, do it. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm in the process of putting together a book list, because I keep telling people, like, read books, and then they're like, which ones? And I'm like, well, I'll get back to you on that. But Tom, I think that if you grew up Christian, even if you went to a Christian school that was not science denying, which is good to hear, because my first thought was, learn about science. If that part has kind of been covered, I guarantee you there are other things that are still going to be holding on. And that is why my initial instinct to this, as an answer to this question, is there is no next step, because deconversion does take a lifetime. It's not a thing you do once and then you're done. It's a thing that you constantly need to be aware of. And even if you didn't grow up religious, you live in a society that is influenced primarily by a religious history and religious background. So there are a lot of things that we take for granted as part of secular culture even, that have religious roots. And so if the goal, and this doesn't have to be everybody's goal, right? But if your goal is to fully understand how religion has impacted you and is impacting you, that deconversion process is not going to just apply to the God question. It's going to apply to pretty much everything that you approach now. And so I think that at this point, you're at the brink, you've gone through that door, right? That first door of deconverting from a religion. This religion is false, right? This God does not exist. Now you're in the house and you get to explore it, right? And you get to go into every room and you get to look under the beds and you get to open the closets and you get to see what's in here now, right? What is in here that won't serve me anymore, that is inaccurate, that's not factual, that's harmful. And that process can take a long time. And there's no deadline.
So yeah, I guess the no deadline's a good point about it. Like, you don't have to do any of this. You could just,
Right.
if you used to go to church and you used to, talk to your pastor or whatever, you could just stop and then you could just never think about it again. And, you would still be not religious. You would still be an atheist. And if you wouldn't get anything out of your life to go any further, then don't. But I think the point that V's making is that there are a lot of things that religion does influence in people's lives, and certainly maybe more from the skeptic angle. Like, you can apply this skepticism that's got you to where you are now to other things, and knowing the most true things and the least false things possible can make your life better. So that's, it's a good thing to do that I would recommend. But if you don't like it, or you can't be bothered, or you just need a break because deconverting is stressful, then have a holiday from it. Don't think about it for 6 months, 5 years, whatever, if you don't want to.
Absolutely. I love that you brought up skepticism specifically, Katy, because that is kind of, I think, what I would say, if you did want an action plan, next step, next book to read, I think focusing on informal logic is a great place to start, because that talks about all the ways that people argue fallaciously, and all the way you can break down an argument from another person and see if they're using fallacies, see if they're, falling prey to any kind of bias, and how we use language to prove points. And that is going to be more crucial than anything related to the Bible or your religious background, to making sure that you're not only not falling for things that people are trying to pull you back with, but also not falling for things in the future about, religious claims or other claims at all.
Right. This has been so helpful.
Good.
That's great.
Awesome. Well, this was a great question, and I think it's one that not enough people have heard asked, and so have an answer to. So thank you, Tom, for calling in and asking.
Thank you. You both have a great day.
You too.
Thank you, Angie.
Bye.
So, on saying about when I sort of came out to myself and felt insecure, I remember doing a lot of arguing and discussing and understanding and learning and stuff about atheism and theism stuff. And then I got to a point where I was kind of done with it. And I honestly went years without considering gods or religions or anything, years of my life where it just was not a factor, because where I went to university, there just wasn't any religious people really, and it's just not important. And I kind of got back into it, and I think because I just addicted to arguing basically. But not everyone has to, it doesn't have to be a huge influence in your life, but
Exactly. I was the same way when I was living in Portland. That city is it's not very religious. And so there wasn't that conflict there to make me into an activist, right? It took moving into a Midwestern city that was very influenced by, Christian conservative politics to be like, oh, I need to do something about this. So yeah, it's not something that's required. You are still an atheist, regardless of how much deconstruction you do. But if you're looking for a next step, that could be a good place to start.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk with Nick also in California. Lots of CA calls today. Hi, Nick. How can we help you today?
Nick.
Hi, how are you guys doing?
Doing good. What's your question for us today?
So much like the last caller, I'm a recent ex-theist. So
Nice.
Now.
Okay. Awesome.
Thank you. But I do have some questions still that were kind of lingering on my mind. And it's about near-death experiences. I just kind of want to get your guys' take on it.
Yeah. I actually, the other day, I was watching a Netflix series called After Death or something like that. And it's a new Netflix documentary series on near-death experiences. And it's approaching it very much from the History Channel. Woo, look at this cool thing that definitely exists.
Aliens.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, give me your best shot. I'm going to watch this first episode and suspend my disbelief and hear what you've got to say. And it was really disappointing because the woman who was the focus of this first one was like, well, I fell out of a kayak and was pinned under the water for 30 minutes. And during those 30 minutes, I died. And I know I died because I know it. I wasn't pronounced dead, but I know that I was dead. And I had this experience that lasted all 30 minutes until I was woken up again and pulled out of the water and resuscitated. And that was it. And then they talked about like what she saw and what she felt and like what how that influences her belief in God today. But for me, like it kind of encapsulated some of the biggest issues that I have with near-death experiences, which is equating near death with death, first of all, right? If you are nearly dead, then you're not dead, right? And so you don't actually know what happens after you die because you haven't died, because people who have not come back. So there's a difference there. And the fact that she wasn't pronounced dead by a physician, right? She was pronounced almost dead when she got to a hospital finally. But her near-death experience was just that, right? It wasn't I died and came back. It was I almost died and then I didn't. And here's what my brain did while I was almost dying. And the whole argument that, oh, well, it lasted the whole time. I was there for the full 30 minutes. Have you ever had a dream for 5 minutes that lasted a month, right? Where you like get old and you like have your grandchildren and then you wake up and it's been 5 minutes. Like your brain doesn't know how to math and how to time, right? So there are so many small issues. I'm massively distracted by that adorable cat right now.
Sorry.
Never apologize. Yeah, so it kind of just encapsulated a lot of the issues, and I'm wondering where you're sitting with that.
So yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the lady in the kayak, because that's actually one of them that I saw.
Oh, okay.
That's good.
It's a really popular near-death experience on YouTube as well. It's like one of the main ones that pops up when you type in near-death experiences. She's like a spine surgeon or something like that.
Yeah, she's a doctor, and she's like, everybody makes fun of me because I believe in God because of this experience. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry people are making fun of you, but you're a doctor. You should know these things. Like, okay.
When you say near-death experience, like, I guess there's two ways to view that. And when you first said it, I thought you meant like people who are like pronounced brain dead and then recover, or, you know, people who die in some sense that we might describe as dead. But then there's also near death as in like you have a car crash and you survive it, or, you know, you fall off something and you just miss hitting your head on something, and then because that's also kind of like near death in a sense.
Or like a car passes by you and you almost get hit or something like that. Right?
Yeah. So I've had a situation. So I actually had one day where I nearly died twice. One of my friends threw this big stone and it hit off something and it grazed my nose, and it was like bigger than my head. And it was going really fast. It was completely crazy. And then later on that afternoon, we were swimming in the sea, and I can't really swim. And I just got sucked into the current and started going out into the sea. And like, I would have just died then. And my friends like managed to get me back in and stuff. And both at the time, I was like 14, and I was like, I nearly died today. And in the sense that was near death. And I know that some people sometimes think, maybe less with those examples, like with the rocks skimming past my nose, perhaps God steered the rock so it didn't quite hit me. And it can make people feel like, you know, I nearly died and God protected me. And that's often kind of like a one sense near death. But I know another kind of, maybe it's not called near death, but like people who feel like they have actually died and they've gone to heaven and they've come back. This is another argument that people make, like, oh, is that more what you were saying? Because what I think's an interesting way of approaching
was more what I'm saying.
Yeah. So with the second one, I think it's very interesting to consider like the physical process of what's actually going on in someone when they are dead or dying. Because it's like, I think when we think of dead, we often imagine it's like this binary, you're alive and then you're not alive. And it's just like, oh, they're dead. Mm-hmm. But dying it's actually quite hard to, like it's a kind of an arbitrary definition of which point someone is dead. Like, you know, you could a large part of your brain could become damaged, and you could still be like functioning in some way, like your kidneys could still be processing, and you could still be breathing automatically, but you could be dead in a like brain dead in a sense. I'm not quite sure what the proper term for that would be. And then you could be in like another step along where maybe your automatic function shut down, or you could be another step along. And there's an obvious point where, like you're just a skeleton now and all of your fleshy parts have rotted away, and that person is obviously dead. And there's an obviously alive, but there is a point at which we're not quite sure where to draw the line. Different bits of you have died, and in some senses, bits of you could die, and then bits of you could come back. Like if your heart stops, you could say someone whose heart stopped is dead, but you can sometimes restart hearts.
Right.
And then this kind of sounds a bit like fiddly, but it is actually difficult to come up with a strict definition of when a person is dead and when they aren't. And what's interesting here is when you're dying.
Let me just cut in real quick and just say that the reason that I would say that it's bothering me, the point that I really kind of wanted to address was when people say, like, okay, say you have like a Buddhist or something like that who's never heard of Jesus. Like there's a near-death experience that I saw, right? There's some Buddhist who's never heard of Jesus has a near-death experience and sees Jesus. Like that kind of baffles me, and I really don't know how to explain it. I know I don't have to explain it, through the lens of skepticism. It should just be, they should be able to provide evidence for me to evaluate and make a decision based off of that. But still, there's something that's compelling about it.
I can understand why it's compelling. I guess for someone to say, I'd never heard of Jesus before, and then I saw Jesus, like that kind of sounds good in that sense. But like, how do they know that they'd never heard of Jesus before? Is that actually, like, can we verify that claim? And then when they said they saw Jesus, did like they wake up and be like, I just saw this thing called Jesus and I don't know what it is?
Yeah, right. If they've never seen Jesus before, how did they know they saw Jesus?
Yeah, unless Jesus said that to them. But then, like, what just seems quite likely, when someone says that to me, I kind of think, well, they probably knew what Jesus was in their mind, and then their brain started to die, and then it kind of came back, and then they interpreted whatever shapes, whatever structures in their brain just decided, oh, that was this thing that we've heard of. Or maybe they came back and they said, I saw this glowing figure and it had a beard, and I think it was like the Son of God or something. And they're like, oh, do you mean Jesus? And they're like,
right.
Oh, tell me about Jesus.
This idea that like, oh, so many people have never heard of Jesus or Christianity. It's like, okay, even before the internet, Christians did a really good job of colonizing almost everywhere. So like it's very difficult to prove. And then with like layer that on top of like having access to the internet, like there is no way that so many of these people were like, I didn't even know anything about it. And then I had a premonition and now it's all proven to me. It's just, it smacks of conversion stories, testimonies, right? Like we all know that if we grew up in a religious environment, we know the testimony deal, right? And every time you tell it, it gets a little bit bigger, a little bit more elaborate, and then it's all of a sudden it's like a huge miracle, right? And you're like, okay, well, there might be a grain of truth in there. Maybe this person didn't think about Jesus very much and then saw Jesus for some reason in a near-death experience, or maybe they saw someone, like Katie said, that matched the description, in some way, and then someone else was like, oh, clearly this person saw Jesus. But I would be hard pressed to find evidence of people who I could verify had never heard of Jesus or Christianity before, had a near-death experience, and then in that near-death experience was confronted by someone who was like, yo, I'm Jesus. Right.
And I think it's also worth pointing out that you hear about people like that from Christians,
right? But
if you go and talk to Muslims, they'll probably find you Christians who saw Muhammad and then wake up as a Muslim, and you could probably find Buddhists, saying the same thing.
Hey, there was somebody who called in. He was an Egyptian pagan and was like, I saw Hecate or Hecate or however you pronounce it. Like I saw this cat god in my living room. Like, okay, cool. Like if we're going by that, like I saw this god, then we're still stuck at nothing, right? Like because everyone has seen every kind of god. So
and that's something else I wanted to bring up. Like, it's funny because there was one particular near-death experience. I'm pretty sure you guys probably saw it before. It was of the brain surgeon, I believe. He had a near-death experience. He wrote a book on it and everything. But he had a near-death experience, and he didn't even see the Christian God or any Abrahamic religion gods. He just was like riding on the butterfly with his sister, right? He didn't.
That's adorable.
Any type of
Okay.
And he came back believing in Christianity, which doesn't make sense to me. When it doesn't make sense. How do you know that whatever afterlife you were in was, the Christian afterlife, if it was indeed the afterlife?
Yeah, considering when brains are in like their reduced function state, they start hallucinating anyway. Like, that's just a thing that happens that we know about. So why jump to the conclusion that you went to an afterlife with your sister and a giant butterfly?
Or
I mean, it's good to know there's giant butterflies in heaven. I'm so game. This is the closest I've come to converting to Christianity.
You can write on giant butterflies, guys. This is important.
I'm in.
All right, you've single-handedly shut down Talk Heathen. We're believers. So here's the thing, Nick. That is such a good example of what we're trying to talk about here, right? We are so it is so easy to manipulate something your brain hallucinated into believing anything, right? So if somebody had a near-death experience and was like, I'm riding on a butterfly with my sister, and that convinced me that the Christian God is real, then we can throw that out, right? Because clearly there's no line from point A to point B, which just proves that what we see in near-death experiences, for those who have them, has no direct bearing on something that actually exists, and certainly cannot be used to prove that that thing exists.
Right. And then I remember Matt saying, if that were true, wouldn't that be unfair to everybody who didn't get a near-death experience? God picks these certain people to experience these certain events. Wouldn't that be unfair to me, who's never had that experience?
Well, certainly, if you believe a God is all good, then sure, that one of those would have to go, right? An all good
if it's
God
a blind faith religion, definitely. If you're given evidence and someone else isn't, and everyone's meant to be equal, then the God's meant to love everyone, but it's just like, hey, you get a free pass to heaven and you don't. Like, that's obviously nonsense.
Yeah. So Nick, we're gonna have to move on to the next call, I think. But do you want to wrap up? Any last thoughts?
I think that's about it. Yeah, that's about it. I can always call in some other time.
And here's what I'll leave you with, Nick. It sounds like you're doing a lot of research into this specific thing. It sounds like you're doing a lot of, watching people's testimonies, reading about these. It's totally okay to put that down and say, I don't know, right? We don't know what happens after we die. We have a pretty good idea because we understand science and how the body works and where consciousness lives in the brain and all of that. So we have a pretty good idea, but we're not 100% sure. At least I'm not. And that's okay. And if somebody comes to you and says, I had a near-death experience and rode on a butterfly, you can be like, damn, that sounds cool, man. And then go on with your life. It's not going to affect the rest of your existence. So if you want to, if this is stressing you out, if you are feeling like this is not giving to you and benefiting you, you can put this down. There is no need to totally explain near-death experiences in order to be a good atheist and a good skeptic, right? It's not required of you. So if you want to just stop thinking about it, you have my permission. You stop thinking about it, put it down. If it's interesting, cool, continue looking at it. If it's stressing you out, you don't need to do it.
Yeah, I probably should put it down. For a while.
All right. Well, thank you so much for calling in, Nick.
All right, thank you.
Bye. So apparently Hecate is Greek and not Egyptian. So I'm turning in my host hat after this. Yeah, and I don't want this to seem like we're saying, oh, it's too scary for us to think about, so run away from it, right? The goal here is to promote positive atheism. And part of that is supporting the mental health and protecting the time of the people who we bring out of theism, right? And who have found their way out. If this is not something that is helping you like actually learn stuff, it's not, you're not required to explain everything theists throw at you in order to be an atheist. Someone can say, well, what about this? And you can say, what about it? And move on with your life. And that's all the brain power you need to expend. There's a certain apologist who seems to like to compare book lists with people, with atheists. Like, well, how many books have you read? And have you read all the books that I read and the ones that I like best and the ones that I think? And it's just this, it reeks of self-importance to be able to be like, hey, I am going to dominate your thoughts and your mind and your time, and you need to let me, or else you're being dishonest or you're not answering the right questions, right? It's not required. We can do what we want.
Also, from like the kind of the raw skeptic point of view, like the way I kind of would consider this, I don't think it's that difficult. Like, if every single person who ever had a near-death experience come back and said, I was just riding on a giant butterfly with my sister, like if every single person did that, then I would be like, okay, as an atheist, potentially I need to explain this because there's something here.
Yeah.
Like, even if it just happens that your brain always conjures butterflies because it's a human evolution, whatever. But that isn't the case. What the case is that some people have near-death experiences, come out more religious. Some people come out less religious. Some people switch from one religion. Some people switch to another. And to me, it just seems like we don't necessarily really know what's going on. But this isn't causing a problem for me as an atheist, because like the skeptical thing to do is say, well, we don't know why people come up with the things they come up with.
Right.
I mean, maybe we do, but I don't know that. And that's all. I just don't know. And it's just not important to me.
Exactly. Or you're dead for 11 hours and you didn't see the ancestral tree with all of your relatives, and you come back and you realize that your whole life was a lie, and you get super depressed until Chakotay comes to you and tells you that it's all okay.
And says, I am actually Egyptian after all, and the Greeks are wrong.
Oh my God. All right. Wow, another Californian call. This is Talk California today. David in California. Let's talk with you. Hi, David. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
Hi. What can we help you with today?
I believe I have heard that you are a determinist. Is that correct?
You have heard that I have serious doubts about the concept of libertarian free will, and that's about it. I think determinism is just as viable an option as free will.
Okay. But I mean, because I've been looking into like neuroscience and things like that, and I have a question because I feel like I am leaning towards determinism.
Okay.
But I also, think that, I can have some maybe not free will, but like I have some choice, because like I understand that like the synapses and, there's processes behind why I do what I do. Mm-hmm. But I can also like catch myself doing those things and then like stop it and reroute to something else. You know what I mean? So it's like,
maybe that's another trait that you've got built in. Like that's just another part of your brain that tells you to sometimes question what you're doing and do the opposite thing. Like you kind of feel like, oh, I was going to do this anyway, but actually I'm not going to, because I've heard that some people think they have free will, and I'm going to exercise my free will by not doing what I wanted to do. But that's just another part of your brain being like, sometimes I like to do the opposite of what I want to do.
Well, yeah, I guess, I mean, it's not necessarily that I'm like making a choice and then I'm like, oh, no, I'm actually going to do something else because, screw determinism or whatever. But
screw determinism.
I'm just going to flip the table. Why not? Like,
but like, so like, when I have things that like trigger me and I get mad, and, I know that's just my brain reacting in a certain way. And I've worked with myself to not let that happen. You know, it's not letting the animalistic part of my brain take over and make me go into this other thing. I'm like trying to train my brain. So when that trigger comes up, I consciously not have that happen and control how I react. I mean, does that make sense?
I think maybe the point like that you're getting at here is like if it's all determined, then what's the point in trying to do it, I guess. Like say you have an angry response and maybe I'm just destined to always have an angry response, but like that's kind of not what it means, I guess. Like we could say that it's always predetermined that you were going to be an angry person 5 years ago and now you're going to be a person who's not as angry because you've worked on it. Maybe you didn't have a choice to choose to work on it, but that's kind of not really important because you are working to become, to react to anger less, and whether that was always going to be something that you did or not doesn't really matter. I don't know how well I've explained that, but like just because the concept of free will in general potentially doesn't exist, that doesn't mean you should stop trying to improve yourself.
I'm not trying to say like I'm going to stop trying to improve myself because free will doesn't exist. I'm just wondering, like, I guess maybe I'm not wording it right. Like,
no, I did just kind of jump ahead there. I might have guessed what you were going to say. I'm sure you're wording it fine. Like, I didn't mean to put you off then.
No. I agree with what you're saying. It's just like, I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel like it is determined for like, because of, past experiences and all of that. Like when something happens, this is how I'm, determined to react through, if I believe in determinism, but I can say, okay, that's where it's, should go if that's what has always happened, but I'm going to make the conscious effort to try and not let that happen. So like, am I really making that conscious effort to do that? And I understand you saying, well, maybe it's me like just reacting, having, maybe I was always meant to have that reaction to that, but I don't know. I guess I feel like I want to always try and improve myself. And so that's like, maybe that's why I'm doing it. I don't know.
I guess when, sorry, go on, Dave.
My question for you, and this is always an interesting conversation to have. I certainly am not the best person to have it with. I would definitely point you to either, Cosmic Skeptic did an episode on this recently, which is very interesting. But my takeaway is, you say, well, I can choose to do something differently because I want to be a better person or I want to improve myself. Did you consciously choose that want to improve yourself? And can you control that want, right? Can you control the motivations that cause you to make choices? And I think if we ask that question, then we go back farther and it kind of becomes this infinite regress of, okay, well, at what point does the free will come into play, right? And so I think that this is an interesting conversation to have. I guess my question for you is, how does this pertain to, or does it pertain to questions around God or religion at all?
I mean, no, it doesn't really have anything to do with religion, I guess. I'm an atheist. I've been an atheist pretty much my whole life. I was born and raised in the Mormon religion, but it never stuck.
That's good.
Good.
It seems like a lot of that's going around. Utah's only about 60% Mormon now and dropping
really
pretty quick. Yeah, apparently.
Isn't it like 99% at one point?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I would also point you to the Scientific American article called, let me see if I can find this, How a Flawed Experiment, quote unquote, Proved That Free Will Doesn't Exist. And this was published in 2019. It's very good. And it talks about the Lebesgue experiment from the 1980s. That's kind of the one that people point to disprove free will. That's actually been debunked, or at least sufficiently explained that now there are multiple theories as to why that experiment ran out the way it did. So I'd say I'm still on the fence on this issue, right? I don't know. I pointed to the LeBay experiment myself when I was more in that camp. I was like, well, look at this. This is clear. And now somebody's come along with another explanation of it, which is also compelling. So I know I have to do more research before I come to a conclusion. And as long as we keep doing that, I think we're fine.
Yeah, and definitely, I'm always open to different, information and keeping myself my views proportional to the evidence for it. So
perfect. Well, that's all we can ask. And whether or not we're in charge of it, I'm glad you got that down.
Yeah. I guess maybe one thing I'd add is with something like this, I try and consider what the actual underlying process that would allow it to happen could be, like right down into like beyond brain structure and stuff. Like so I guess kind of like what are thoughts and what are decisions? Because if you've got like these synapses and they fire and they make you make decisions and stuff, and there's certain chemical levels in your brain, and you make one decision when the chemical level is this, and you make another decision when it's this, whatever. If the chemical levels are set in a certain way, then you like always make that decision, unless there's some kind of thing outside of the chemicals, like a soul or a sort of a disembodied consciousness or something, which can override what the chemicals are doing, or it'll have some other like random element in it, like perhaps the way like at quantum physics levels, or perhaps there's just a mechanism built in, which means sometimes it is random. Like if you were programming this, you might have like some variable which, if it's over 60 do this, and if it's under 60 do this, but you also have like a plus random determined by random heat in the universe or something. But like in order to have a decision, in order to like not be predictable, if it's based on like chemical levels or electrons or something, then it either needs a random element or it needs something else that can make decisions outside of that.
Yeah.
And it's either one of those could be true. I don't know enough about chemistry or physics or anything to claim whether there is or isn't a random element. But the soul angle, I'm not very convinced of. But and I just think that's kind of what you would need, because if you're someone who says, I know for a fact that we can predict electrons and photons, then good luck. But also, if you're someone who says, and I also don't believe in souls, then kind of what's left? What could free will be?
Right. Yeah, it's definitely, it has implications for larger worldviews, certainly.
Yeah.
But at this point, we just don't know well enough, and that's okay. All right. Thanks so much for calling in, David. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I enjoy you guys, and thank you for everything you do.
Of course. Thanks for calling in.
Thanks.
Oh my goodness. All right. We are going to let a couple more people call in because we're running a little bit shy of...
Come and convert us. Come on, guys.
Come on, you guys. This is your chance.
There's always so many theists big talking on Twitter. They'll come at me and they'll be like, oh, women don't know what they're talking about. I could convert you in a second. You wouldn't hold up 5 minutes in an argument with me. And I'm like, cool. Well, it just so happens this weekend I'm on a call-in show. And then they block me. And I'm like, come on, mate.
Absolutely.
Come and prove yourself.
There was one person who took me up on calling in. And even though I disagree strongly with him and think he's probably just a troll, I commend that. That is good. That's good for him.
Good for like matching up to your word.
Right? Come on, you guys. You got access to us here. I'm going to thank the top 5 patrons, or top 7 for me, because I like to include those last 2 because the names are fun. If no one's changed, and it sounds like we're working with the same people, guys, you are so awesome. If it wasn't for you, we would not be able to do this. This is far and away the most generous thing that I personally have seen. Looking at these lifetime pledges is just mind-blowing. You guys are amazing. So thank you to Eric Tweet, Desert Heathen, Bethany P, Jay Friedman, and Ward Knipling. And because Eric is not here to ask me to say these last two, I will say them. Balaam's Donkey and Dingleberry Jackson. Those two get grandfathered in because their names are awesome. But it's not just top donors, right? We are so reliant on those $1 donations, $3 donations, $5 donations. Those keep us running. That is what the majority of these pledges are. And that is where we find all of that support and all of that stability and the ability to grow and have on wonderful people like Katy. So thank you, everybody, whether you're donating $100 or a single dollar, you are valued and we love you. All right, let's dive back in. Oh, we've got a couple more calls. Let's go to Hunter in Illinois. And Hunter is neither an atheist nor a theist, it looks like. Hunter,
interesting.
Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hi, what can we help you with
Can you
today?
hear me? Oh, sorry, I'm not supposed to ask that. I'm going to talk about like morality and how like I don't really see how like there is any clear morality other than what harms people and what doesn't, and why we should trust that.
Okay, well, I'm pretty much in agreement there, at least for a starting point. I think that a good basis is, does this help the society thrive or not? And, you know, is that done at the cost of individuals?
Yeah. And I was just wondering, like, would that be a good place for God? You know, it's like, if we can't really understand, like, why these things are good other than they help something keep on going on, then maybe we have this God here to just say, yeah, this thing is good.
Well, it would be a good place for
Because
God if God wanted to actually step up to the plate and tell us. Like, that'd be great. If there's a God out there and they want to come down and they want to say, like, you know, cutting your hair on a Sunday is morally bad for some reason, then if they can provide it in a format that's more convincing than like some 2,000-year-old book that's been translated 5 times, then maybe I'll consider not cutting my hair on Sundays. But like, I kind of feel like I need a more rational explanation. If someone, there's so many things that people claim their gods say is immoral, like, oh, gay sex is immoral. Like, why? There are so many things that I could explain to someone why it's immoral. Like, it's immoral to punch that child because it will cause pain and suffering and it adds nothing to anyone's life. And if you normalize this, going around punching people, then you might get punched and that'd be bad for you. That'd be bad for me. It's just bad for everyone if we can just go around randomly punching people.
Yeah,
Whereas if we have gay sex is immoral, what's the rationale? So God's told me it's immoral. Like, I'm not convinced. God's got to explain that to me. So I don't even know if God stepping in would be necessarily good, but it'd be something if he'd actually do it.
Hunter, are you thinking of a specific God here, or just like we could call that morality God?
No, I'm not thinking of any specific God. I was just going to say, I'm sorry, I was cutting you off. That was so rude.
That's okay.
No, you're good. Go for it.
I was ranting.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, that, like, it also is hedging your bet. Oh, yeah, 1 second.
So believing in a God is hedging your bets, or allowing for a God to exist in your worldview is
Like,
somehow like insurance against that God should they exist?
Yeah. 1 second. Sorry, guys.
That's okay. We can vamp for a little bit. Maybe put yourself on mute. I'll actually mute you for a minute there, Hunter, so nothing comes through. I'll unmute you as soon as like a minute, so you can do whatever you need to do.
One thing that I would add is if we had a situation where we said, well, in order to like codify these morals, it would be good for us to have like a God. Like, it's almost kind of an argument for saying, well, we'll just call it God. You know, we'll call this morality God. The issue with that is if we're going to say that our morals like are God, then you're kind of just putting whatever moral decision and moral understanding you have today into this like unchangeable situation, unless of course you say God can change his mind, and then you haven't really added anything. But it's almost like we have like social contracts and we have laws in place which we base on our morals, but those things can change, and they do change, and they've changed throughout the whole of human history to a position which certainly I would consider is more moral. But when we have points where we just say our morals are God, then as soon as I say, well, I actually think that this moral decision is wrong, well, it can't be because it's God. So now you're not just challenging my moral decision. We're not having a debate about what's moral. We're having a debate about my God. And suddenly that like it's used as a way to kind of get you extra like force behind your thing. Like, well, I actually think it's moral that we let people have sex with anyone we like. And then you'd be like, well, I actually think it doesn't matter what you think because my God says it's immoral. And it's just like kind of claiming an extra layer of authority. And that doesn't, I don't think it's not just that doesn't really benefit us. I think it's actually a roadblock to improving our society and morals and improving people's lives.
Yeah.
So I'd argue that's a bad thing.
Well, it seems we've lost Hunter. Probably.
Oh no.
Probably something came up. I hope everything's okay. But it's a good question, and I think you're hedging on to Pascal's wager a little bit, where you're hedging your bets to see if a God exists. But here's the thing: if you're not picking a specific God, then most specific gods are still going to be pissed at you for not worshiping them according to how they want to be worshipped. So just believing in a God doesn't seem to be doing very much for you, especially because you don't even know if this God cares if you believe in them or not, right? They might not even care.
Also, my God that I believe in, everyone goes to heaven apart from people making Pascal's wager. So, like,
yes.
Watch yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a good argument to be made. If we're being convinced by things like Pascal's wager, then there's a good argument that Pascal's wager is the only way to get to hell, which I love. I love that. Michael. Michael's the next caller. Hunter, if you would like to call back next week, I'd love to continue this conversation with you. We're about 15 minutes out from closing out the show, so we've got about 2 more callers. But thank you so much, and I hope to hear back from you. All right, let's talk to Michael in Alabama.
Hi.
Michael, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, thanks.
Going good. What's up?
I feel like I got picked because my thing goes directly with that other thing that you guys were just talking about, morality.
Look at that, segues. You gotta love them.
Isn't that amazing? I had a weird feeling I might be next. So my thing is, I'm a really sassy, angry atheist, just all the time.
All right.
Yeah, good for it.
Angry. Well, it's my fault because I watch people like Darth Dawkins, or I watch people like this new one, Dr. Witnesser. He's like Kent Hovind to dinosaurs, but he uses Fortnite. But he's a 7-day evangelist, so it's worth. At any rate, my point is...
Sounds like you're bringing this on yourself, man.
Dr. Witnesser scares me, except for he got kicked off Twitch. So I think it's fine now because YouTube is terrible for gaming. So we're fine now. I think
we're safe for the moment.
He's going to get a theme park.
Michael, it says you want to talk about using like words like morality with theists. I'm curious where you're going with this.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't think we should be allowing theists to use the word morality anymore, and we should divert them to ethics, because literally everything, even the stupidest things, have ethics. Like there's an ethical code to League of Legends. If you are supposed to be playing top lane and you wander around the jungle when you're supposed to be doing top lane, that is ethically incorrect to the gameplay. Same thing as you could do ethics to everything, but morality is this fuzzy language where they get to go, well, you guys don't have any morals because you don't believe in a higher power to tell you what those morals are.
Mm-hmm. So I get that. I think that not allowing people might be a bit difficult. I'd love to pick some other things we don't allow theists to do first. But I like where you're going with this. I think that ethics is more grounded in what conversations we actually end up having, right? Conversations about how to act towards each other and in society, and along rules agreed upon by larger groups. So I mean, I'm down if you can get the theists to cooperate. Like, that's cool.
So maybe I'm just a bit confused about the wording.
Yeah, Katie,
sorry.
what's your question?
Maybe I'm just confused a bit about the wording, but if you're saying that there's like an ethical action to do in a game, like, are you saying that like the ethics of chess are to do something, or there's ethics to flipping a coin? What do you mean? Or are you saying the way that you make choices in the game?
Big or small ethics apply. So like morality doesn't apply to League of Legends, really. I guess you could argue some fuzzy. Again, I don't like morality. It's like
I guess I can't see the difference. What's the difference? So like you could say in League of Legends, if you play the game in a really like dickhead way, you will upset some people, and it's morally bad to randomly upset people. Or you could say it was ethically bad to do it.
Because I mean, what I'm saying with ethics is it's meme versus entire idea, right? An ethical conversation, you can get down to the point of literally anything. It doesn't have to be just religion. You can. It doesn't have to be just if it's ethically wrong to harm other people in this way or that way. It's what I mean. So because ethics have different places in academia, right? We have business ethics. We have there's ethics in art. There's all of these things that if you do them the wrong way, you would be ethically in the wrong. But they don't all apply across the board. Do you see what I'm saying? Each ethical thing has to be discussed in each specific thing you're talking about. What I'm really saying is, instead of letting the religious people in general use black and whites, force them into the gray areas. You guys generally do a good job of this, and I'm mostly not criticizing about this. But I feel like the Christian trump card, or in what I see, is, well, where do you get your big laws from? Why is murder wrong? And I go, well, ethically, I can give you 100 reasons why it's wrong. But and also by the definition of the word murder, like kill something. Okay, that's where we're getting into more of a gray area, and we can have a conversation. It also, I think, makes for better conversation in general.
Well, here's my thoughts on this, Michael. I think that we need to be working with the language that the other person is speaking. So if you can get a theist, whatever religion they're a part of, to use the term ethics, you might actually be able to have a more nuanced conversation, because it doesn't have all the religious baggage that morality does, right? Christians, or I'll talk about Christians because that's my experience. Christians seem to have a very ownership-y kind of vibe with morality. Like, we own it, it's ours. Right, ethics is a little bit more neutral and can be a little bit more allow for that nuance. That said, I think you're at the mercy of whether or not the other person wants to talk about ethics and think about ethics in the same way that you do, right? Because they might use ethics in a very different way. So I like the idea. I'm not sure how you'd implement it, though, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd be being very forceful in the conversation. It's good for me because I'm pretty brutish about, no, I'm not talking about that. I want to talk about this. But then I also understand that I'm also looking at a very aggressive part of atheist conversation. But I find it all really, really, like Doug TenNapel gets to talk to people still. Like, he's been a homophobe jerkwad forever because he invented Earthworm Jim or whatever. And he was on with Bosch like literally yesterday, spewing like anti-mask stuff. I mean, I think you're hanging out in some parts of the internet that I don't necessarily, just for my own mental health and sanity. If you're keeping an eye on these people and you're like, hey, in this situation, this conversation would go down well in this way, I'm going to leave that to you. If you want to do that, go for it. I think
we need to be careful about forcing other people to use the same words we use in the same way, because that's going to cause a lot of friction. A better option, I think, would be to have that conversation, be like, okay, what do you mean by morality? Here's what I mean by ethics. Can we pick one or the other so we're not confusing and muddying the water by using words that mean kind of the same thing but with differences?
I also think that
adjacent. You know? Okay, sorry.
I was just going to say, I also think I understand this kind of pressure of, whenever we bring up this word, the argument always becomes about this stupid word rather than about the actual topic that we want to discuss. So it's best if we just use a different set of words and we just talk about the concept rather than letting them have all this nonsense. But the problem is, like, this is kind of thing I face a lot in these like frontline arguments with like, you know, the idiots on Twitter, is you'll be like, well, every time I say this word, they're going to flip out, so I'm just not going to say it. But then the problem is in a way, you're kind of conceding that word to them, and you're conceding that definition to them. And in a small scale, like if you're at the pub and you're trying to change someone's mind and you're like, well, I'm not going to say the word morality because it's a waste of my life. But in a kind of wider scale thing, if you're on the internet and all of the atheists pick up on this point, like, oh, we're going to avoid saying the word morality, then morality becomes a Christian thing. And then when we, like, that might be true for like frontline atheist battles or something, and then the general public obviously don't know the difference between any of these words, and they just, you know, they'll just go along with it. So when the Christians say, we define morality like this, and all the atheists are like, well, all right, we're not talking about morality, we're talking about ethics, then there's just no pushback to their position. And really, like, it doesn't actually matter the difference between those two words so much when you're arguing for like whether we should have a law ruining someone's life or not. Like, we shouldn't have that law.
Right.
So when you're convincing the public of it, you don't want to be shying away from the words that they understand, I guess. So
I think there was a similar conversation that we had a couple weeks ago with somebody who called in and said, I call myself a naturalistic pantheist so that I can talk to theists without them freaking out at the fact that I'm an atheist. And on the one hand, okay, I get where you're coming from. It'll facilitate better conversations on the outset. But again, I call myself an atheist very specifically because I don't want to concede that word, right? I don't want that word to become just the stereotype that a certain type of person uses, right? It applies to across the board. So I see where you're going with this. This is an ongoing conversation that many different people have called in about, with various points about when do we concede a word versus push back on it, and is pushing back on the word worth the argument itself, right? So I don't know. I think it's worth having a longer conversation about, but I'm inclined to agree with Katie. We don't want to concede it.
I recently had this own kind of battle in my own mind about when arguing about LGBT issues and the lines between sex and gender. And when you talk about gender, there is a certain set of arguments where they will always try and suggest that gender is just about like stereotypes. And you're like, well, okay, well, I'll agree. We'll just use the word stereotypes. That's bad. And we'll just use the word sex to discuss people's, like, you know, body setup and stuff. But then you're conceding this word to them to mean nonsense. And then when the general public uses the word gender, like they all do, then all of a sudden the only people defining those words are the anti-trans people. Right. So yeah, it's the same thing.
It's a whole deal. But thanks for calling in, Michael. We've got one more caller that we need to get to before the end of the show. But maybe you know, moderate the kinds of stuff you're consuming online, just because there's enough outrage in the world, and we don't need to be more mad at random internet people than we need to be. I say as I host a show where people call in to yell at me on the internet.
I was going to say, either that or come brawling with me on Twitter on the front line. Like, it's what I do.
Oh my gosh! Well, you're making a difference there. All right. Okay, Katie, I am going to warn you. This person, Carpe Diem in Colorado, wants to know: should doctors be forced to perform abortions?
Okay.
This is the last call, so we're going to close out with Carpe Diem. Hi, Carpe Diem. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi. The good news is, I guess I believe in very that women should have autonomy over their choices and their body. So my real issue is that if you have these abortion deserts, right, where you give doctors the, I guess doctors shouldn't necessarily, should they or should not, that's my question, be forced to do procedures, because if they aren't, then you end up with an abortion desert and a woman that's put in a very dangerous position, right? Mm-hmm. That can't really do it in a safe way because she doesn't have the options. And there are real abortion deserts in the U.S., and those things bother me a lot.
I live in one.
So my argument on this would be, if we let doctors just have irrational prejudices, then they're just not good at their job. Like, they're not really a doctor. If you say, "Oh, I'm a doctor, but I won't operate on people with brown hair," like, then you're not really a good doctor. You shouldn't be licensed. You're literally incapable of doing your job, because, like, anyone could say, "Oh, I'm a doctor, and the only like medicine I do is like quackery nonsense." Like, no, in order to be a practicing doctor, you need to meet some certain standards. And one of those standards is you can't have an irrational prejudice against someone because of their like race or their, sexuality, because that's barbaric. And if you say, "Well, I'm a doctor, but I won't do abortions," it's like, well, you're not good enough to be a doctor then. Like,
right. It's like going to McDonald's and saying, "Hey, I want to work for you guys, but I will not under any circumstances give anybody fries ever." It's like, okay, well, cool. That's your prerogative. You don't have to work here. Bye.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think, and no, you couldn't ever force a doctor to do an abortion. Like, what you're going to do, like threaten their family if they don't do it? It's nonsense. But you can just say, you can either be a doctor who serves fries in McDonald's, or you could just not be a doctor. Like, they're the two options. There's no third option where you just randomly won't help people.
I don't disagree with you guys at all. The issue that I have is that, and by the way, I believe that beyond the autonomy issue is that when you give women power over their, reproduction, which they should have, of course, it actually helps society in general. So we should have those doctors that doing those things. Is my point. But if you give them an ultimatum, where you give them an ultimatum where you say you either do it or you don't be a doctor, maybe you just don't get doctors, right? And then that's the issue. Like, well, how do we solve the problem of doctors refusing to do it?
Make becoming a doctor something that will cancel your student loans. Fund abortion.
You can incentivize people. Okay, I like what you pointed out there, Katie. Even using the term forcing doctors to perform abortions is ceding ground that I don't concede. And second, I agree with you that if the two options are like, well, you either force them to or there are no doctors, then we're in a pickle. That's frankly a false dichotomy and is not happening. Like, if we want more doctors, there are so many people that we can get into those institutions and train up and have as doctors. It's just that it's terribly, terribly exclusionary right now and really expensive and a huge time commitment, to the point where a lot of people just don't even see it as an option. So make it accessible, make it free, or pay the loans back if you get a job as a doctor, right? And you will have an influx of doctors. Also, I think we can see from, like, in the UK here, you're not allowed to, well, only since the end of 2019 or 2020, you now have to perform abortions everywhere in the UK. We haven't run out of doctors. I mean, we've got our own health problem nonsense going on over here, but it's not because there aren't people who want to be doctors, just because we've said you have to do abortions. And I know that different areas have different pressures, but like you could say, you can incentivize. If it was an actual problem that we faced, if anywhere in the world made a law where everyone stopped being doctors, then we'd have to be like, oh, maybe we should consider this. But I just don't think that's a realistic concern.
Right. Also, there are different kinds of doctors, right? We're not going to dentist's office going like, you need to perform an abortion right now, right?
It's like the Sum 41 song. The dentist said my mom should have had an abortion.
Oh my God. We've got Katie to sing. We win.
Oh
no. No. So here's the thing. If you become an OBGYN, right, then yes, that is part of your job description. So yeah, if you want to keep your job and make money,
do a good job or fuck off.
Do a good job.
So I appreciate what you guys said, and I also appreciate Vida correcting the language of forcing doctors, because I agree that I didn't even realize it was conceding a problem already.
Yeah.
But the issue I have then, everything you said is true. The gatekeeping probably is the problem. Perhaps it's intentional, to cause the problem. But I also say, then how do you end up with abortion as it's like it is in some of the southern states of the U.S.? And what do we do with those women that are living in this situation where they're too poor to get to the nearest doctor? It's prohibitive. And
right. The problem there is not that there are no doctors and not that doctors are refusing to perform abortions. It's that they're selectively defunding places that offer abortion. So it's not that the doctors are saying, I'm not going to perform it, screw everyone else. It's that the people who want to are being defunded actively. So I agree there are abortion deserts. It's a problem. It is one of the biggest problems, I think, that is happening right now that I'm hoping this new administration will at least kind of help. But it's not about doctors refusing to do abortions. It's about clinics that want to help people perform abortions and want to do that being denied the ability for stupid reasons.
Absolutely.
Like your ceilings aren't 7 feet tall, therefore, no, you can't.
I think in terms of what you should do, I think that you can do a multi-pronged approach to this. One is like lobbying and voting and doing the kind of legislative angle, but then there's also the grassroots on the ground stuff, like donate to your local charities which help with this kind of thing. You can volunteer your time to them. You can drive people in your area to the nearest abortion clinics. You can go and defend them from all these crazy protesters outside.
A lot of the same people who stormed the Capitol on the 6th were convicted of either there was an abortion clinic bomber who attended the thing on the 6th. It's the same people and people who go to.
Hopefully they'll all be in jail.
Yeah. Hopefully here's the thing. The people who have been going to Planned Parenthood for healthcare. I went to Planned Parenthood for healthcare for years when I didn't have insurance, and it was never for an abortion. It was for basic healthcare. I had to deal with those people who everyone saw on the 6th every day that I went there, right? That was a thing that I had to deal with. So here's the deal. What you want to do if you want to help, either become a doctor, because that would be cool, or, vote for people who will support doctors and what they want to do. We're going to head out. Carpe Diem. We've got to wrap this up so we can get over to Discord, but you're free to join us there if you would like. ACA Discord. I'm sure the link will be down there on the 3rd pretty soon. There we go. Thank you, crew. tiny.cc/ACA Discord. Thanks so much for calling in, Carpe Diem.
Absolutely. You guys are great.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So ended on it. I was expecting that one to be a lot more confrontational than it was.
Yeah, that was good.
I like that. I think that it's important to not play into the narratives though, and to not give people that. We have the ability to have hypotheticals, but let's talk about reality. Also, I do want to make it clear, not just women get abortions. Hi. I one day might need one. I am not a woman. So just making sure we're doing some inclusive language there.
I think this is also links into another point that some people sometimes bring up, just quickly, sorry, about the forcing the cake baker to make a cake for a gay wedding kind of thing.
Right.
And I think that's kind of letting them set the tone of this person is being forced against their will to do something. And it's no, if you want to provide this service, if you want to be a doctor, if you want to be a baker, if you want to be, someone who works in McDonald's, then you can't be someone who also doesn't do that job properly. If you're someone who won't serve fries, you're not good at your job. If you're someone who won't bake cakes for people who are left-handed or who have blue eyes or something, you're not good enough at your job to do that job.
Exactly.
So you're making the choice to just not do the job.
Exactly.
That's you're being forced to do a good job or to have another job.
Forced to make French fries.
Yeah, it's not no one's being forced.
Right.
That's a ridiculous
structure.
Yeah, go for it. Sorry.
That's okay. I love that we kind of ended on something that we both got a little bit passionate about. I like it. All right. Before we sign off, I do want to thank the crew and make sure we're giving that shout out. Crew cam. Can we get the crew cam up here? Yes? No? Crew? Hello?
They've gone home.
Are they gone? We're
here
flying solo here. I like it. I'm pretty sure that that John is the one in the middle getting burned by the rest of the crew at this point. Thank you, crew. We love you. We love everything that you do. It's because of you that we're able to be here every week, and that is not forgotten. Let's do some love rings. Let's see if we can get those today, because maybe not. If not, that's fine. We'll just look kind of silly. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Yay! Love rings. I love it. So as always, we want to close out the show first by thanking all of the essential workers, all of the first responders, all of the healthcare providers who are putting themselves on the front line right now during COVID. We are seeing a new strain showing up here. We're seeing
That's
that
from where I'm from.
Yeah,
we
thanks for that, Katie. Appreciate that. So we've got the Katy strain. We also are seeing a heightened increase in winter months, right? It can get more difficult to be safe in the winter. So make sure that in order to protect these vital workers who are making our countries run right now, wear a mask or wear 2, double up, like use hand sanitizer, wash your hands, keep your gatherings limited if at all. Be safe, guys. You don't want to lose your sense of taste or smell. That sounds like it would suck. Okay. For those of you who don't believe, for those of you like the callers who called in at the beginning of the show, who are new atheists, who are asking what's next, right? I love that. What do we do now? We're free. We have no rules. There are no expectations. I can build my life. We're here for you. We want to help. We've all been there. Join us on Discord. Join us on Facebook. Join us every Sunday on the show. Say hi to Katie's cat. Just be part of this community because we're here for you. And for those of you who do believe, we don't hate you.
We don't hate you. We just disagree with you.